Okay, so we're learning checkmates, and this is part 2 in our series on Let's Learn Chess. And hopefully we learned in the last video how the pieces move in conjunction with doing a bit of study yourself, because to me, it's never just one thing. Like, I have my middle school students spend an entire week working with each other on learning piece movement, and it comes with very little assistance on my part. I present the material and let them socialize as they work through the learning process with piece movements. And they can use technology to play with programs like Lichess, which are extremely helpful. So let's get started here with the most basic of all checkmates, and it's the queen and rook checkmate. And we like to call this the ladder checkmate. So first, the great thing about practicing checkmates on Lichess is when I make a move, the computer is going to make a move for the other side for defense. So let's first start with the concept of check. Remember that rooks move in long verticals and horizontals. The queen moves in long verticals, horizontals, and diagonals, a combination of the powers of both the rook and the bishop. So, if I move my rook here, I'm attacking the king, placing him in check, and that's going to be signified by when the king turns red. And we're going to use a concept here called the staircase. I'm going to put my rook beside my queen, and I'm just going to get my king out of the way. And what I want you to notice when the queen and rook are beside each other, they are attacking in this way. So I'm going to start my pattern here. Right leg, where the rook is covering these squares, and then left leg. And we see the rook is covering these as the queen is covering these. And I'm gradually taking space in this way in a very, very easy pattern. Now, you said kings can capture if it's one square away. Also said kings can never move into an attack or move into check. So here when I place the rook, he could not take my rook because my queen is defending it. The black king would be moving into check. So that's impossible. So I continue here and I finish my checkmating pattern simply here, and that is checkmate, as the black king is under attack, and no matter what he does, he cannot get out of check. And there's 3 ways to get out of check. Run with your king, use one of your friendly pieces to block the attack, capture the piece that's attacking you. If you can't do any of these 3 things, you have one of 2 situations. It's either stalemate or checkmate. Checkmate is when the king is attacked, no matter what he does, he cannot get out of check. Let's see a stalemate. A stalemate is not good. Stalemate happens, and I'm using the same kind of pattern here as we did before with the staircase, except I'm going to do something a little bit different. If I put my rook here, notice that this rook is attacking all these squares. If this rook comes to this square, he's taking away all of these squares. So we would be attacking every square around the king. But the king himself, it would be his move. He can't move. So did we win? No, that is actually a stalemate. That is a draw or a tie in chess. In tournaments, there are 3 results. If you win, you get a point. If you lose, you get no points. And if you tie, and there's a number of different ways to tie, you get 1/2 of a point. So in a traditional tournament, you don't just go in, you lose 1 game, you go home. A lot of people are confused about that. You typically play 5 games. And you play someone else based off the score that you have. So if you win your first 2 games, you have 2 points. You're going to be playing someone else who won their first 2 games as 2 points. That way, if you're winning, the tournament gets harder. If you're losing, the tournament gets easier. You're playing other people with a similar score. It's a very, very fair system, giving new people and experienced players alike someone to play at their level if the tournament has a lot of players in it and a lot of different strengths. So here, the easier move though, if I'm cutting off here, I can go to this square, which will take away all key squares from the king. Now next up we have this queen and bishop situation, and honestly, you don't even need to use the bishop here. I can put him to the side and simply use the queen, and I like to call this method making the box smaller. And I'm gradually going to make the box smaller until the king steps on the edge of the board. And when he steps on the edge of the board, now I am trapping him here. Notice how all the squares my queen's attacking? He can only go back and forth between these three squares, and I'm simply going to bring my king in. And now my king is directly in front. I can put the queen here, which attacks the king and all squares he could move to, and that is checkmate. So next up we got the queen and knight. Notice our knight moving in the L's. I can move my queen here, and I'm gradually going to make the box smaller. And keep in mind, as my king is defending the queen and the knight is defending the queen, the black king cannot capture. And it also should be noted that if I was to lose my queen here, the game would actually be a draw, because you cannot win with just a king and knight. You also can't win with just a king and bishop. You need to be able to get king and queen, or king and rook, king, knight and bishop, or king and two bishops in order to win. So here we see the king on the edge of the board, and the rule is to trap him on the edge of the board. I get in front and checkmate. Lastly, we have king and queen, and it's not much different what we've been doing. I just completely ignored the piece, so I'm going to make a box, and now I'm going to make the box smaller and smaller until I force him to get to the edge of the board, in which I trap him. And as I bring king closer, I checkmate. Lastly, we're going to take a look at the king and rook checkmate, and again, we're going to use this method of making the box smaller. And when I can't move the rook to make the box smaller, I am simply going to move my king until he gets trapped on the edge of the board, and we're going to continue to make our box smaller. Then we've left him two squares just to go back and forth in as we've cut off the rest. And that is the easiest way to do the king and rook checkmate. As we see, the king is cutting off these squares, the rook is attacking him in the corner. He can't get out. And to me, it is a great starting point that as soon as you learn piece movement, you start learning checkmate right then. You don't set up the board and start playing games. You'll have terrible openings, and you don't even know what you're playing for. So in my curriculum, we learn the piece movement, and then we learn the checkmates, because we know what we're playing for and what to do. It even teaches some basics of strategy. The next step is, after we've done checkmates, we go back and we actually do elements of endgame strategy, where we play with a king and just the pawns. One king and all 8 pawns versus one king and all 8 pawns. And the objective of the game is to get a pawn to the other side of the board, where you can get a queen and practice checkmate. So this is a very smooth transition to teaching elements of endgame strategy and getting reinforcements, pawn promotion, as well as how to win. How do we play chess? So that'll do it for the basics on Let's Learn Chess. You can check out some of our other videos for more in-depth analysis of different things in chess. Hope you enjoyed it.